When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to be doing a video. Originally was going to be very broad, and it was going to be kind of a video on reason, logic versus emotion. It was going to be kind of another video on the George, how he writes kind of saga of videos I've done in the past. But when I was doing the notes, I kind of realized this could be more of a character series in general. And so again, let me know if you guys like this idea of let's go through a couple characters and look at some of the most important decisions that they have to make and see how they're influenced either by emotion or reason and logic. And that's something we're going to talk about today with Catelyn, because I think for George, she is a character that he really instills this in as one of the main themes within the story, of this idea of how, again, reason can kind of play into it, but emotion can override that, where you as a character or as a person may realize, okay, this maybe isn't the best choice, but your emotion drives you past that. I think you look at a lot of the ideas of love where you overlook things because of the way you feel about something, even though you're given all the warning signs. And so that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. But let me know what you guys think on this idea and if you want to see more of this series. So we're going to start out this series with Catelyn. But again, if you guys like this, if this does well enough, I will definitely go into other characters like Cersei, like Tyrion, like Robb, Jon Snow, all of these type of characters if you guys want to see it. And we'll be kind of be looking at a lot of their key decisions that they make throughout the series and how they are motivated by emotion or logic. Because I think almost everything in A Song of Ice and Fire can come down to how a person is feeling emotionally. Either they're attached to something or it brings up something from their past that again equates to why they would make that decision. Now, there are times at points where characters do things that are for the betterment of everyone else. It's reason, logic, and emotionally is not actually for them. It's not a good thing for them from that point of view. So we're going to go through Catelyn, and Catelyn I think is one of the most polarizing characters within the fandom. I think, a lot of people dislike her, a lot of people like her, and I think Catelyn is a character that has aged a bit better because of the show. The show, I think, was a lot kinder to Catelyn, took a lot of scenes of Catelyn really being a very despicable person and kind of took those out, and then also made some of her more controversial decisions, which we'll talk about in this video, and made them make a little bit more sense. And we'll kind of get into this as we go through the video. But one of the things I really found interesting is that in the books, Catelyn releasing Jaime is kind of completely an emotional response to, again, her losing, or in her mind, losing her two children, Rickon and Bran. There's no real threat to like Jaime dying or anything. Like, he's kept under guard in River Run. He's perfectly safe. Whereas in the show, they did something massively different, where they had Jaime was just constantly with their camp. And so it gets to this point where the Karstarks are basically inciting like basically a rebellion, and we're going to kill Jaime regardless. So it got to this point where if Catelyn hadn't actually released Jaime might have just been killed, which would have actually been probably even worse for Catelyn personally. So again, they gave in the show a lot more reasoning and making Catelyn a bit more like smart when it comes to the idea of logic. Whereas the book, it's not so clear. In the book, it's much more that Catelyn is driven by emotion, and she's constantly dealing with this battle of what logically makes sense, what she should do, and what her heart is telling her, or what her emotions are telling her. So that's going to be what today's video is all about. We're going to go through some of her logical points in the story, some of her emotional points. We're not bound to hit all of them, so leave me some of your guys' favorite moments of either Catelyn being smart or her being dumb. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow, reach our people that might like this content as well, and let's get into it. So I want to start with the logical points, because I feel like we talk a lot about some of her bad decisions, things that negatively impacted others around her, herself, and show her kind of giving into that emotional side of her, right? We've talked about that a lot with her. But I want to look at logical points. So logically, Catelyn makes a very rational decision when it comes to Renly and the Stannis situation. She's kind of the audience, right? Like, she's kind of us looking into this situation of two brothers that are distinctly opposites, that Again, the logical decision should be we shouldn't be fighting each other. We should band together and fight the real enemy, the Lannisters. So Catelyn is kind of our voice of reason in this little situation. And so this is this first point where we really see, this is the point where, again, this is, you know, probably one of my favorite times in all of A Song of Ice and Fire, the middle of the War of the Five Kings, kind of the beginning of that period, and Renly's Peach chapter is fantastic. Catelyn really is that voice of reason. So that's kind of her, you know, first point that I wanted to make up here because I think it's one of her best. Now the next one is Robb being crowned. Catelyn, you know, is happy that, you know, Robb is loved by his people and things of that nature, that they'd want to crown him. But she also realizes that there's no going back now. Whereas when Robb was a lord, right, there was a lot more things he could do. You know, he could ally with Renly, he could ally with Stannis, all of these things. But when Robb made him, or when Robb was made a king, it isolated them quite a lot. Because here's the thing, a character like Stannis, a character like Renly is not going to just allow Robb to just be king, right? It kind of defeats the whole purpose of being king of Westeros if the North is now just not part of that. And so Catelyn is someone that notices this, right? She is someone that understands where all this is coming from. She understands how this could go very wrong, and that this is not a good decision, right? Robb becoming king of the North was a terrible decision. It was the worst decision possible for Robb's cause. Now, another thing I want to point out here with this is Catelyn is actually, in my opinion, pretty smart. Because the whole discussion here at this point is, well, Catelyn brings up, why did we come south? Right? Like, what's the point of continuing this fight? Like, Ned has died already. He can't be brought back. Well, it's to, I guess, reclaim what's left and not go on kind of this idea of vengeance. And so Catelyn is actually very intelligent when it comes to this, even though Catelyn's made a ton of mistakes. She's a big reason as to why the war has even happened. She is very logical in the approach that, like, at this point, like, what do we really have to gain here? Like, revenge is not going to do anything for us. And so why don't we just, again, this is kind of where this idea starts, where maybe we should just trade, like, Jaime for Sansa and maybe Arya, because then at least we get our family back, we reclaim our family, and, you know, thousands of people don't have to die. So I think this is one of her more smarter moments. Now, we also go to one of Robb's biggest failures, and the idea of Lord Karstark when he is being made, or when they're kind of deciding what should happen here. Catelyn is this character, along with Edmure, who brings up this idea of making Lord Karstark a hostage, basically saying, if you guys, you know, are still loyal to the king and all these things, that Lord Karstark will be fine. It's kind of like the idea where, you know, when someone loses a war, right? So you look at the Blackfire Rebellion, you would then have hostages so that they wouldn't step out of line. For instance, Theon going to Ned. It's the same idea to kind of keep them in line. And so this is very logical from Catelyn, and it's actually taking a lot of the emotion out of it. Now, as I've kind of thought about this decision from Robb's point of view, the issue with this is, like, it's kind of hard to actually make a really logical decision, because any way that Robb went about dealing with Lord Karstark wasn't good. It was the worst thing that possibly could have happened, because, yes, I think for the short term, it made the most amount of sense for Robb's cause to keep the Karstark men loyal by this. But what it actually does is it kind of allows and shows that, okay, if you commit treason or these things, it kind of incites more of that rebellion type thing. That's something we're going to talk about, I think, maybe next week, with the idea of how Bloodraven and Baelor decided on how to deal with people that were traitors to the realm, right? The Blackfire Rebellion stuff. And so that's an interesting point, but I think Catelyn has the right of it, of what is the logical decision. Also, you factor in things with Robb having emotion towards, like, honor and duty and things like that. And also just anger of being betrayed by Karstark and stuff like that. Now, there's also another point that we see of logic, is that during this point, as Robb is kind of, you can kind of see, like, he's getting desperate. He understands his position's getting weaker. The Karstarks were a significant portion of Robb's forces. He kind of notes that, well, what if we have sent letters to Lysa, maybe she could help. And Catelyn, again, shuts this down immediately, right? Like, we're in the middle of Storm of Swords at this point. she's had plenty of time to make a decision to help Robb, and Catelyn straight up denies this, saying she's not coming. It's not because she has an emotional response, again, to her stuff with Lysa. It's just logical, critical thinking here that gets us to the point where she's not helping. She's just not. It doesn't make any sense with her character, what she's shown to Catelyn. And again, at this point, Robb's, you know, if Lysa had joined Robb way earlier, like, things could have gone massively different for Robb. Another one of Robb's major blunders is when he marries Jane. Now, again, this is another emotional decision from Robb. He is someone that, again, he, in his opinion, dishonors Jane, and so he marries her. And Catelyn is very against this, right? Catelyn has this quote where she questions, how many men are the Westerlings provided? And again, compared to the phrase, it's nothing, right? The phrase, we're committing way more. And here's something I think you also look at. You know, we always think of Robb as a protagonist, but think about what Robb does when it comes to insulting the phrase. Like, the phrase have been an active part of Robb's campaign. You know, men have died for Robb that are, you know, Frey men. And here you are, you know, betraying that proposal, betraying this alliance. And so, yeah, Catelyn has the right of this. And again, is kind of our logical, you know, side against what Robb is doing. And then we finally see Catelyn defending Grey Wind. When we start to see, you know, right before the Red Wedding, this time period, like right when he starts marrying, you know, Jane and the Westerlings are around, and we start to see very close to the Red Wedding, that Robb has started treating Grey Wind very differently. The two have become more distant. They're not as friendly. Robb doesn't allow Grey Wind at, like, dinners and things of that nature. And Catelyn, again, defends Grey Wind because Catelyn understands the importance of the direwolves. She understands that connection. Again, going back to Summer saving Bran's life early in the first book. And that's a logical decision, right? Again, Grey Wind and the direwolves have shown, and again, this isn't emotional at all, because there's been multiple occasions where we've seen this occur, where the direwolves seem to have this knowledge of knowing who is friendly, who is a good person, who is not so good, and protecting their owners especially. Or I wouldn't even say owners, right? I would say, you know, their partner, right? But yeah, so again, I want to notice, though, if we look at any of these situations, all of these situations have to do specifically with, you know, Robb or Renly and Stannis or other people. Catelyn is a character that is deeply flawed emotionally when it comes to decisions that she is making, things she has to do. When it comes to looking at someone else's situation and judging it and, you know, taking in all the facts and, you know, arguing all that, she's pretty good at it, right? We've seen multiple things when it comes to Robb's mistakes that she points out here. Again, something else that I didn't really even talk about on here was, again, Catelyn didn't want Theon to be sent to Balon. That's another just element of that. Again, when she is looking at someone else's decisions, she's very logical, very rational. But her making her own decisions and things that she wants to do, she doesn't really think through those logical outcomes until it's kind of too late. And that's going to lead us kind of to the second part of the video of kind of her emotional stuff. So one of the big talking points that I had with Tyrion being captured in that chapter review is that Catelyn is extremely motivated by emotion. When she sees Tyrion come into the Crossroad Inns, she's instantly reminded of Bran and how Bran could have died the cat's paw assassin. And that fuels her to make this an emotional decision to capture Tyrion. Now, it is also, there is logic in there, like how are they going to escape? How are they going to get Tyrion somewhere safe? And again, even after the fact, she understands the logical consequences of what she's done, but it's the emotion that wins in that moment to have her capture Tyrion. Because after that point, after she's captured Tyrion, there's no going back, right? She's already made the decision. And so that leads to a bunch of other stuff that's really bad. But again, in that moment, that is kind of the emotion winning over the logic, how like we've seen in other events, like I talked about earlier with the logical section of the video. Now, again, we see another idea that I talked about at the very beginning and kind of the intro is the idea of releasing Jaime. This is almost completely fueled by the idea of grief. She's lost her husband, who she loved. She's lost, in her opinion, right? She doesn't know information we know. She's lost Bran. She's lost Rickon. Arya hasn't really been heard of, but she assumes she's still in King's Landing. Sansa is, again, being held a prisoner basically in King's Landing. And Robb has the weight of the has a ton of pressure on his shoulders. And so what does Catelyn do is she sees the only path that she can get her daughters back and takes it, even though it damages Robb's cause significantly, right? She basically took away Robb's shield because Tywin could not act when Jaime was his prisoner, right? If the Red Wedding had, say, happened when Jaime was still a prisoner at Riverrun, the Blackfish would have just executed Jaime, right? There wouldn't have been that. And that was something that Tywin was not willing to risk. Again, Jaime is the golden child. He's the one that's supposed to inherit, after Tywin. And again, I know that Jaime's a Kingsguard, but Tywin was trying to get him out of that and all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. But again, completely based on emotion. There isn't really logic and reason when you look at the big picture. She thinks she's saving her children, which again is very doubtful. It's very doubtful that Jaime even reaches King's Landing when you really think about it. And then also the idea that, okay, now that you've given away your prisoner, that they're going to honor your trade and they're going to send the daughters back. And they don't even have one of them. So again, you see that idea, but what it really does is it backfires. If anything, it's one of the main reasons it gets one of her kids killed and herself. So yeah, we see that kind of emotion winning out when it comes to another one of the Lannisters. Now, another thing I want to kind of put on here is the idea of her negotiations with Walder Frey. It's something that maybe we don't look to instantly as an emotional response, but think about the circumstances at this point, right? Ned is still alive, and Robb needs to cross this bridge, right? Robb needs to get across. He can, again, free up Riverrun, get the Riverrun forces, which would be a huge boost to Robb's campaign. And if Robb has to try and take the twins, he will lose a ton of men and time, which is more important. And so that leads to Catelyn really not making a logical decision, and the deal with Walder is pretty bad. Like, think about it from this point of view. Like, the idea was that Arya and also Robb was supposed to marry into the Freys. That is a ton. You are now basically making one of the Frey girls, at this point, you are making this Frey girl instantly married into one of the 7 most powerful houses, right? The Warden of the North and Robb. And then beyond that, right, when Robb ends up becoming king, she's now a queen, okay? And then also, that's not even enough, right? Arya is then going to also be married into this. So it's just a lot to me. And the biggest problem with this is that you take your biggest, like, bargaining chip in, Robb's marriage and, using that, right? We see characters like Renly use that to his advantage. Joffrey and the Lannisters use that to their advantage. Robb doesn't really get the chance. And I think the idea that, Walder Frey wouldn't have accepted any other terms is, I think, pretty dumb. Like, Walder Frey could have gotten a lot from this deal instead of, like, getting, like, Robb. Like, again, I could see a situation where you still do the idea of marrying Arya into the Freys, or maybe Bran or Rickon or someone like that into the Frey family, a lesser Stark, but not the top one. And so to me, this is again, emotional response to trying to save Ned and the idea of just being desperate. And the last one, which I think is the most important, is the treatment of Jon. Catelyn completely treats Jon badly based upon the actions of Ned, and because she thinks that he slept with another woman, and she's jealous that, again, Jon is being raised with her children, even though Jon's a bastard. And that's something that constantly comes up in Catelyn's head. It's not like something she only thinks about every once so often. It's a very common trend. Whenever even a bastard's named, right? I just did a Catelyn chapter, and Maya Stone's brought up, and she's a bastard. And instantly, Catelyn thinks about how she's angry, but she's also guilty about thinking about Jon. And she's a character that, again, has a deep jealousy of that woman that she doesn't even know. It goes so far that this innocent child that, again, is growing up motherless, is being treated this awfully. And, you know, if you even go along how I think Catelyn was someone that had plotted to get Jon to go to the Wall. And when you think about how the Wall is, it's a horrible life. You know, it's a life where, again, criminals get sent to go. Her hatred and jealousy of Jon's mother led to destroying a young man's life. And we know Jon is, you know, he's adapting and such, but she has condemned him to a very difficult road, and we'll see how that turns out for him. But thank you guys all for watching this first video of the series. If you guys want to see another one, let me know down in the comments what character you would like me to do. I have a couple in mind that I want to do, but if you guys, you know, get enough support in the comments, if you want to like other people's suggestions, do that, and I will try to get to those as soon as I can. And thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.